Here's something most people never stop to think about. The people who seem the most emotionally grounded in a room, the ones who stay calm when everything falls apart, the ones who somehow understand pain without needing it explained to them, they are often the same people who had the hardest childhoods. And that is not a coincidence. Today, we are going to explore one of the most quietly fascinating paradoxes in human psychology, that the very experiences we assume should break a person sometimes quietly build them into something remarkably resilient, something that comfortable, predictable childhoods rarely produce. And by the end of this, you might start looking at your own story very differently. Think about someone you know, maybe a friend, a coworker, or even yourself. Someone who grew up in an unpredictable environment, a home where emotions were never really discussed, where love felt conditional, where they had to figure out the mood of a room before they could even think about their own needs. Now think about who that person became. Chances are, they developed something most comfortable childhoods simply do not produce. A kind of emotional awareness that runs deeper than what any classroom or therapy session could teach. A quiet ability to sit inside discomfort without falling apart. A patience with pain that most people simply do not have. Psychologists call this post-traumatic growth. And while the term sounds clinical, the reality of it is deeply, profoundly human. Research from the University of North Carolina, led by psychologist Richard Tedeschi, found that a significant number of people who experienced serious adversity in early life reported stronger personal relationships, a greater appreciation for life, increased personal strength, and a deeper sense of meaning compared to those who had not faced similar challenges. Not all of them, but a meaningful, measurable number. And the question worth asking is, why does this happen? What is actually going on inside a person who grew up in difficulty that makes them emotionally stronger on the other side? Here is what happens inside the brain of a child growing up in an unstable or emotionally unpredictable environment. When a child cannot predict how a parent will react, when home feels emotionally unsafe, when affection comes and goes without explanation, the brain does something remarkable. It adapts. The amygdala, which is the brain's primary threat detection center, becomes highly sensitized. The child learns to read microexpressions, tone shifts, sudden silences, and emotional tension before most adults even notice something is wrong. They become, almost involuntarily, students of human behavior. They study people the way other children study cartoons. And over time, this constant emotional scanning builds something extraordinary, an almost instinctive understanding of how people work, of what someone really means when they say they are fine, of when a room is about to shift, of what another person needs even before that person knows it themselves. At the same time, because these children rarely had the luxury of emotional outbursts, because expressing too much could make things worse, many of them develop early and sophisticated self-regulation. Not because a therapist guided them through breathing exercises, but because survival quietly required it. This is where the emotional strength begins. Not in comfort, not in safety, but in quiet, repeated, invisible adaptation. Now pause here for just a moment and consider something. How many of the people you most respect for their emotional depth actually had easy, uncomplicated lives? Think about the people in your life who give the best advice, who stay present when things get hard, who do not panic, who somehow always seem to know the right thing to say in a difficult moment. Where did that come from? There is a pattern here that psychology keeps returning to again and again. Adversity, when it does not completely overwhelm a person, can activate what researchers call stress inoculation. The idea is almost biological in its elegance. Small doses of manageable hardship, especially when navigated and survived, can strengthen psychological resilience the same way a vaccine works with the immune system. You are exposed, you struggle, you survive, and something in you becomes more capable because of it. The operative word, of course, is survived. Not all trauma leads to growth. That deserves to be said clearly and honestly. Severe, chronic, and unprocessed trauma can cause lasting psychological damage. It can wire the nervous system toward anxiety, hypervigilance, and emotional shutdown. That is real, and it is important. But for many people, especially those who found even one stable relationship, one trusted adult, one internal coping strategy during those difficult years, the hard times quietly built a foundation that a comfortable childhood simply cannot replicate. There is another layer to this worth understanding deeply. People who navigated emotional complexity as children often develop something psychologists call empathic accuracy, a heightened, almost refined ability to sense what others are truly feeling, sometimes before those people can articulate it themselves. Because they spent years reading unpredictable environments, their emotional radar becomes finely tuned. They notice the person at the table who is pretending to be fine. They recognize grief in someone who is still smiling. They understand loneliness in a way that people who have never truly felt it simply cannot access. And crucially, they know how to sit with someone in pain without immediately trying to fix it, explain it away, or make themselves more comfortable by changing the subject. That last part is rarer than most people realize. In a world where emotional intelligence is increasingly recognized as one of the most valuable human capacities, the people who developed it the hard way often carry a quiet, deep advantage that those around them cannot fully name or explain. They just know that being around this person feels safe, that this person gets it, and that did not come from a comfortable life. There is also something worth saying about meaning making. One of the consistent findings in trauma psychology is that people who experienced adversity early in life often develop a stronger need and ability to find meaning in their experiences. Rather than compartmentalizing pain, they tend to process it, sit inside it, turn it over, and eventually integrate it into their identity in a way that becomes a source of understanding rather than just suffering. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, wrote that the last of human freedoms is the ability to choose how we respond to any given circumstance. His entire life's work was built on observing how people who had endured unimaginable suffering could still find purpose, direction, and even peace. That capacity for meaning-making is not random. It is, in many cases, something that difficulty quietly teaches. So what does all of this actually mean for you? It means that if you grew up in difficulty, if your childhood asked more of you than it ever should have, if you had to grow up faster than felt fair, the emotional strength you carry today is not accidental. It was built, layer by layer, year by year, through every moment you had to figure out how to feel something, process something, or survive something without anyone showing you how. That does not make the pain beautiful in some oversimplified way. Pain is not a gift. Difficult childhoods are not something to romanticize. But what the human brain does with pain, what people build from their hardest years, that is where the story becomes genuinely remarkable. Resilience, according to the American Psychological Association, is not a fixed trait. It is largely a learned and developed capacity. And the quiet, uncomfortable truth is that learning it almost always requires something hard. Here's the final thought to leave you with. Emotional strength is not loud. It does not perform itself. It does not need an audience. It shows up in how a person listens without judgment, in how they respond to someone else's crisis without making it about themselves, in how they give others the exact kind of presence and understanding they once desperately needed and never fully received. And more often than not, that strength has roots that grew slowly, quietly, in very hard ground.